11:54. You already know the drill. Okay? So let's get ready for our study. And we've been going through a series of Bible studies, and we're trying to draw the biblical theology of one of the major themes of the Bible that permeates every single aspect of the entire narrative. In the Bible, this is a big theme that goes from Genesis through Revelation. It's the theme of God's judgment. And this should not be a theme that renders fear for the ones who want to be in a healthy, trusting, and loving relationship with their Creator, because this is actually the gospel of God's judgment, because it means vindication. Some of you already know I'm a lawyer. I'm an attorney as well as a pastor, professor of theology, and in court, in dealing with different cases. Well, we live in different structures, different legal systems. When we explore the American legal system, it is based on common law and based on precedents. In Brazil, South America, and most of the European countries, we live by a different system called code law, strictly adhering to what is written in the code. No wiggle room for much of an interpretation. Not much of a strength when it comes to precedents, legal precedents. And in our exercise here today, we're trying to understand what is the theology, the structure, the setting of God's judgment. And we learned that beyond our sphere and beyond our capabilities to grasp all that is entailed in this great judgment of the Lord, we know that it transcends our reality. God's judgment is a cosmic conflict reality as explained in the Bible. And we have some scenes sprinkled throughout biblical narrative of that dimension of this judgment of God, that we became a part of it. But it existed before our own participation. It is a cosmic conflict. And we studied the book of Job in those first 2 chapters. And we learned a little bit about the rules of engagement of that conflict, of that cosmic conflict that would bring about the judgment of the Lord. And we're trying to understand what are the premises and the principles behind those rules of engagement, the code, the rules for that legal procedure to happen. Because it is one fact in the Bible and throughout the Bible that a court scene is presented to us every now and then with very special characters and players that are a part of that cosmic scene. We have learned that behind the rules of engagement, God, and let me try to put it in words that we can be reminded and go back to what we've learned so far in a very quick way. There is evil because there is freedom. There is freedom because God is a God who allows you to choose. There is no possibility for real love except in the context of real freedom. You cannot make your wife love you. Believe me, I've tried. She needs to decide to love me. It comes from the heart. It requires freedom of choice. And God wants to be in a loving relationship with you. Guess what the prerequisite is? Freedom. Freedom to choose. But when you're free to choose, God is also putting up with a huge risk. Whenever you love, you're under the risk of being rejected. You're under the risk of having your heart broken. And that happens a lot. And that's what's happening with God right now in our planet, in this cosmic conflict. He gave the opportunity of human beings to choose, to love Him or not, to love or reject, to be in a trusting relationship or rebel against his ways, against his character, and we chose the latter, the second. And God, in his love and wisdom, in this cosmic conflict that is not only about him, we also learned from the creation narrative in Genesis chapter 1, well, chapters 1 and 2. In chapter 2, you have the expansion of that same scene. But in chapter 1, you see all of the attributes of God. They are ingrained in Genesis chapter 1. And we learned that this creator God is a humble God. He's almighty, all-powerful, but he's also willing to share. He's not selfish, Carol. Our God is a God who gives, and you see that in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 28, when he creates men and women in his image and likeness. And then he invites them, well, let them have domain. The Hebrew word, kavash. Let them have the same domain that I have on my throne, so y'all are kings and queens. And that's the point of Genesis 1. You were created to be a king, but not any kind of king, not Charles III. You are to be a king like God is king of the universe, taking care of everything, taking care of everyone. So God is a God who shares power. He shares power. And in the governance of the universe, we have learned by those different texts that we've studied so far that God has decided to share his power, his ruling governance power with the universe. And the Bible calls this a heavenly council. And before this heavenly council and those scenes of judgment that we see throughout biblical narrative, you are introduced to God having conversations with someone who is called Hasatan from the Hebrew, which means the accuser. It's a very specific word that's used in two specific contexts. Job, chapters 1 and 2, and Zechariah, chapter 3, which presents scenes of judgment. So this character shows up in the heavenly council where God shares his governance and he makes accusations. And he uses Job as part of that accusation. God uplifts Job. Have you seen my servant Job? He loves me. He trusts me. He has freedom of choice. And guess what? He chose me. He chose me. And then as God uplifts Job, Satan challenges God's domain and governance. First and foremost, Job's not yours because the earth is mine. I have jurisdiction over that planet. Adam and Eve gave that jurisdiction to me when they decided to align with my accusations. So I have jurisdiction. Remember that word? Another legal word, legal term, iuris from the Latin, that means the law, and dicere, also from Latin, means to speak, to say the law, to pronounce the law. Satan was claiming the earth as his. And guess what? We learn that Jesus acknowledges that, yes, this is partially true because he has the deed. He got it. He robbed it. He stole it by deceiving Adam and Eve. But he presented himself as the legal representative of earth, and he made accusations towards God. And God, in Job chapter 1, you see God saying, okay, you think that he only trusts me, loves me because of what I provide, what I give him? Go ahead. Do whatever you want. But don't touch him. That's Job chapter 1, right? And then we learn in Job chapter 2 that in these rules of engagement, God is covenantally, and this is a very important theological word, God covenantally makes arrangements in that procedure. He changes the rules of engagement based on the accuser's request. Because after the enemy comes down and does away with Job's family, except his wife, all his property, everything else, he comes back up and you see Job? Job is still there. He's still my man. He's still there. He's still worshiping my name. And then Satan says, and comes with legal terms, skin for skin, eye for an eye. The law of Talion law, eye for an eye. Of course, he still trusts you. I haven't touched him. Let me touch him. You can lose everything, but as long as you don't touch the person, well, it's not with me. Yeah, I'm sad about losing everything, and my kids, man, I'm heartbroken, but I'm still here. Let me touch him. So the rules of engagement, they are not unilateral. The order of the legal system that's in place in this cosmic conflict, they're not unilateral. God is such a good, humble God that you can trust that he will work up to the limits based on some very specific principles that we learn throughout the biblical narrative as well. The first one is God will never make a decision to interfere supernaturally in this cosmic conflict unless it would break free will. He will always respect your choice. He will never interfere unless you allow him to in a regular stance. So that's the first one. What are the principles behind these rules of engagement? The first one would be free will. What's at play? And sometimes you question yourself. Why doesn't God interfere? Why doesn't God intervene? Why doesn't God do something in my life, in the life of that family, in the life of that country? Why isn't he doing anything? Well, first principle behind those rules of engagement is free will. We've got to choose. We've got to allow. We've got to claim. The second one that we've learned from the biblical narrative is that he will never act and interfere when he knows in his wisdom and foreknowledge, knowledge of the future, that his interference would result in greater evil or less love. He would never interfere. Never. Because he already knows what is going to be the outplay. Sometimes you see, God, it would be simple. Just do this and you will have it all sorted out. And the big question here is, why didn't you just make Satan disappear? And took his memory wiped the memories of every being that's ever been created who knew Satan. That'll be easy, right? But then would God be honest by doing so? Or did he need to address the question, address the accusation? So he's true, he's honest. So he's addressing the situation. He's addressing the accusations because he knows that the tares need to mature. Matthew chapter 13. That's another piece of what we learned, right? And then finally, he would always abide, God always abides by what's been covenanted. And the word covenant, it's a very specific one. In the Bible, it's used with different connotations, but the big one that encompasses all of God's contracts with human beings is berith olam. It's got everlasting covenant. So his covenant is based on his character. Whatever God promises, he will do. God cannot lie. God won't lie, and God will not betray. God will be strictly abiding by the principle. So if there was a negotiation of terms with Hasatan, with the accuser, he will respect that. And we've seen in our last study that one of those basic questions that I had when I was a kid, Becca. So you have Satan showing up in the garden of God, garden that God had planted for Adam and Eve, and then Satan has the freedom to interact with Eve and Adam, and no one comes up. If it's my kids, and I see that there's someone there that I don't like that person. Remember, God asks you to love everyone, not necessarily to like everyone. But here's the point. I don't like that person. I don't like them, man. Not really. So if I see my kids interacting with that person, I'll intervene. Okay, what's going on here? What's happening? What's happening? I will send an angel at least. No angel shows up. Eve is tempted. She falls. Adam comes next. And then fast forward to Jesus when the real cosmic conflict sends us a clear picture and image of that same scenario. Jesus in temptation. Where are the angels? Where are the angels? He's starving. He's thirsty. He's being tempted. Where are the angels? Where's the counterpart? Where's someone saying, no, it's a lie. It's a lie. Don't fall for that. No. So these are rules of engagement. Okay, you'll be allowed to tempt him. And these principles are the ones who guide those rules of engagement and how far God interacts and intervenes in our history. So the Bible provides us with a framework that makes a lot of stuff clear. So I have no, and here's the point. Did Job have any idea of what was going on? We don't have all of the details, but here's the thing that we can learn from him. Even if he slays me, I will trust in him. I will trust in him, because here's the point. If you're going through struggles right now, it might just be that God has claimed you as his own. Have you seen my servant, Jay? Have you seen my servant, Rhonda? So he uplifts you, and you're on the front lines of God's army. So these are beautiful truths of this covenantal conflict, cosmic conflict that we're seeing revealed to us in the Bible. And today, I want to focus in, hold on tight, I'll still have some minutes here, okay? So, hold on. Today, we want to focus on this heavenly council in at least two scenes of this heavenly council that we want to explore with you. And the first one, I would address you to the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7, and we're going to read, there's so much to explore here. If you read the Bible presents you with a collection of different literature genres, okay? Not all of the Bible is simple, straight to the point, clear, objective stories. Parts of the Bible are poems, parts of the Bible are prophecies. And those prophecies, they come with what we call Tolkien, C.S. Lewis. They study that kind of literature, the fantastic literature. And you're watching right now the resurgence of some of those series, right? Tolkien with the Lord of the Rings, and now the return of the Lord of the Rings, and expanding on that same narrative. And on the other side, you'll see the Thrones, the War of Thrones, right? Kind of that thing going on. So these are mythical and fantastic literature. In the book of Daniel, you have a mix of both. Stories, clear, based on history, empires, real characters, and you have a mix of prophetic, symbolic beings that are happening and showing up in this book. And when we get to chapter 7, we're introduced to something that reveals an input and an inside scoop towards that scene of the sanctuary and this heavenly council. So I'd invite you to read with me Daniel chapter 7, verses 9 through 14. Let's read. I watched till thrones were put in place. First thing that caught my attention here, I don't know about you, but come again? Thrones? What about the throne of God? No. Remember, God is not selfish. God shares his kavash, his governance, his domain. So there are thrones in this heavenly council. People that have real beings, that have real authority and jurisdiction. Okay? Good. So thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, and its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And here it comes. What do you have there in your Bible? Verse 10, part B, the second part of verse 10. The court was seated, and the books were open. This is a court scene. This is some legal procedure that's happening. And there are different characters. We know that God is on his throne. We know that there are other thrones as well. And that the books are being opened. Verse 11, I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. Symbolic, literature, okay? I won't have time to get into all of the details, but this represents that same depiction of the entity that's used by the accuser, Hasatan, okay? So you will see the enemy, the accuser, is present here somehow. And I watched until the beast, the animal, represents the power, was slain and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, other animals that we don't have time to go through it right now, but we will study Daniel, the entire book of Daniel in the future. The rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away. All of these animals and all these symbols here, they are agencies on the side of the accuser, okay? That suffices for today for you to understand. Their dominion is taken away. The enemy had taken that dominion from Adam and Eve. And now you see all of these false agencies of power haven't taken their dominion away. And as of the rest of the beasts, and yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. This is very important. Because we ask today, okay, Jesus won the ultimate victory. At the cross, he proved God's righteousness and God's mercy. Perfect balance in love, demonstrating his character. Why are we still here? If he has won the victory, why are we still here? And that's the question that we're going to address in our next study. So you cannot miss our next study, because we're going to go from this image of the Old Testament, heavenly counsel, to the New Testament. And we're going to learn what are the differences and why we are still here, even if Jesus has already won the victory. We will learn all about that. So let's close as we stand, and let's sing "It Is Well With My Soul," number 530 in your books there.